5 teams on the bubble ahead of March Madness 2025. Selection Sunday's coming up March 16th. Let's get into these 5 teams. I'm going to go over what these teams need to do over the next 2 weeks to ensure that they're not worried about their chances getting into the NCAA tournament. The first team I want to talk about, Oklahoma. This is the one team going around Twitter, going around X. Everyone is talking about Oklahoma because they have some good wins in non-conference. They beat Arizona, they beat Louisville, they beat Michigan. But we look at what they've done in the SEC, 4-12 as I'm talking on this video. They need some wins. You can't go into the tournament. My suggestion here, Oklahoma, you can't go 4-14 and expect to make the NCAA tournament. You can't go 4-14 in the SEC. I know we look at their entire schedule. We look at some of those wins in non-conference play, but at some point, you can't lose 14 games and expect to make in conference play and expect to make the NCAA tournament. I think they need to win at least 2 more games the rest of the way to feel comfortable. They're home against Missouri and then at Texas in the final. So I think if they can split those 2 games and then win 1 more in the SEC tournament, they'll be looking good. If they only have 1 more win the rest of the way, or if they have 0 wins, I would say they aren't looking good. Next team I want to talk about, speaking of that Texas team, a little different situation. They're a little opposite, as in they don't have the same wins as Oklahoma does, and they actually don't really have any very good wins in non-conference play. Their best win in non-conference play was against St. Joe's. Other than that, all of their wins in non-conference play came outside of the top 100 at Ken Palm. And then they're 5-11 in the SEC. Their best win, home against Missouri, at Oklahoma. Okay, they have that win at Oklahoma, who's also on the bubble, but the rest of their schedule, there's a lot to be desired. So again, this is a team that they're at Mississippi State. They host Oklahoma. Maybe if they split those and win 1 game in the SEC, they'll be in a weird spot. I still think they need at least 2, probably 3 to be in a better spot. Maybe split these. If they lose both their games the rest of the way, they've lost 3 in a row. If they lose at Mississippi State, if they lose home against Oklahoma, I don't see them getting into the tournament, no matter what they do in the SEC tournament. I'm not expecting this team to make the final or win the SEC tournament either. I guess they could do that, but on the assumption of them splitting their final 2 games, they're going to need probably 2 wins in the SEC tournament, depending how those seeds work. Going to the ACC, North Carolina is in another team that's in a little different situation. They're finally racking up wins because the ACC isn't that good of a conference. They end the season at Virginia Tech, home against Duke. They don't really have great wins. Looking through the schedule, they lost against all of the relevant teams in non-conference play. You can look at it like, okay, well, they played all these elite teams and they lost small non-conference play, but they're at least getting wins. Okay. Their best win right now is on a neutral against UCLA. They beat SMU, who is kind of on the bubble, but kind of not. So a lot of people are saying if at UNC, if North Carolina beats Duke at home in the regular season finale, they'll be in the tournament. But I'm not completely there yet. This team, if there are some bid thieves, depending on what happens around them, this team still lacks a lot of great wins and still has some losses that leaves them to be desired. Home against Stanford, you can't lose that game. At Wake Forest, who's no longer on the bubble, that's a tough loss. Same with Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has kind of fallen apart in the second half of that season. So if they beat Duke, I'd still say no matter what happens the rest of the way, if they beat Duke, if they beat Virginia Tech, if they win those 2 games, I'd say maybe 1 or 2 ACC tournament wins. We'll get them there. If they lose to Duke, I think they may have to go to the ACC tournament final, depending who they beat on that route. So a difficult situation here for North Carolina. I will say, okay, they have picked it up lately. They have changed their lineup a little bit late in the season here. How much is that going to factor in against us in a second meeting against Duke? I don't think they're going to win that game, but maybe they do. Maybe they do. Another team that leaves a lot to be desired here. I guess we're talking bubble teams, so all these teams leave a little bit to be desired. But Nebraska, sitting here at 17-12, they're at Ohio State on Tuesday, home against Iowa. This team is kind of falling apart. Nebraska wasn't looking in a good spot. They had some nice wins. They have a win against Illinois, Oregon, Ohio State. Home against UCLA, home against Indiana, at Creighton. They have good wins, but now they're starting to pick up some losses. You don't want to lose at home to Rutgers. You don't want to lose at home to USC. You don't want to lose to Penn State, Minnesota late in the season. Just a tough spot here for the Cornhuskers. Now they're at Ohio State, who is another bubble team, and this game could, Tuesday night, could have a lot of ramifications here. But if Nebraska loses that one, as expected, they're home against Iowa. Let's say they win that one. I still think to feel comfortable, they need 2 Big Ten tournament wins. And again, all of these are depending on who they actually play. If it's against, some of the worst teams in the conference, maybe it's not going to mean much. But I think if they lose at Ohio State, I think Nebraska needs 2 Big Ten tournament wins to have a really good shot of making the tournament. If they only get one, I think this is going to be a bubble team that is going to be looking to go to the NIT or looking at other tournaments, not March Madness if they lose that Ohio State game. And finally, the 5th team I want to talk about is one that's kind of creeped in a little bit, and it's a mid-major, so it's a little bit of a different situation for Boise State. 21-8 overall. They also have a weird resume. They have good wins, Clemson, St. Mary's in non-conference play, but they also have some bad losses, worse losses than most teams on the bubble. Lost to Boston College, lost to Washington State, and then at San Francisco. Some 3 pretty bad losses, and then you compare that with their wins, and it's a difficult spot for where this team is. 21-8 overall, 5 losses in MWC. They close at Air Force, who has been kind of a free win in the Mountain West, and then home against Colorado State. Of course, they need to win those 2 games. You can't end the season with a loss at home. So Colorado State, not really a bubble team, but they picked it up towards the end of the season. So get 2 wins there for Boise State. And I still think to feel good about themselves, they probably need 2 wins in the Mountain West tournament. If they get 1, then it's going to be in this current situation of where it's a little risky. You're risking your tournament lives on possible bracket thieves, possible tournament thieves here. So those are the 5 teams I'm talking about ahead of the 2025 NCAA tournament.